My name is James Ingar, and I'll be your main host today. I'll be in and out of the show, it's whatever. Today, on APUSH videos, episode 1, Fort Duquesne. We're going to talk about Fort Duquesne, which is one of the battles that took place during the 7 Years' War. This Battle of Duquesne, which took place during 1758, was the second battle, and during 1754, there's a first attempt by Lieutenant Colonel George Washington, and he eventually lost. Depending on where you are in the world, it's going to be called different names. In French-speaking Canada, they call it the War of Conquest. In Sweden, they call it the Pomeranian War. And did you know Pomeranians are a type of dogs? The Battle of Duquesne took place during the 7 Years' War, which was open conflicts between British and French mainly. There's many other countries, but it was the main forces of British versus the French, and Indians were just divided up among. And this battle just took place along the Ohio country because there's a disputed area with English trying to encroach on French settlement and back and forth. This battle is one of the characteristics of Pittsburgh, since this battle took place in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is named after William Pitt.
Now, with an attractive feature like the Ohio Valley, the English were wishful of making expeditionary trips to the region. Soon enough, they made these trips and were setting up trade posts throughout the Allegheny region, as well as the French claimed territory. This gave way to trading and earning trust with native tribes. Following this was a commerce war. The French and English were both trying to befriend the natives, which was a problem and eventually led to a small and short conflict called King George's War. This war ended in 1748 with a truce between the two, and it also allowed English trading rights in the region. This was later frowned upon by the French monarch, King Louis XV. So he ended up sending expeditioners through the Ohio Valley and had them bury 11 plates to officially claim the land for France. Going back to the subject of the Indians, they were divided into tribes and also divided in their loyalties. They usually sided with whoever was giving them the best deal at the time. So circumstances, a lot of times, caused changing allegiances. In this case, they were often more sympathetic with the English, and this was not good news for the French. In order to counter this rising Indian-English alliance, the French began to build forts, extending from Lake Erie down to the Allegheny Valley. This gave French some headway, so they put forth a policy of delaying the British trade with Indians. They argued that the British traders were dealing weapons and contraband in an effort to incite the local tribes to unite against their leader.
The French were not the only ones who were jealous of the Indians. The British were too. The British gave the French an ultimatum to leave their forts in the Ohio River Valley, and the French denied. The response of the governor of Virginia was to send 40 troops to the forts of a river in what is now Pennsylvania, and they built a fort named Fort Prince George. The French retaliated by sending a much larger force to Fort Prince George and demanding the surrender of the British forces. The British had no choice but to surrender and retreat. The French then occupied Fort Prince George and built a new fort on the same location, and its name was Fort Duquesne. We're on the battle now. The British wanted to drive the French out of the Ohio River Valley, which is why forces were sent to Fort Duquesne to remove the French from the fort. The British sent a force of 6,000 soldiers into the Ohio River Valley. A force of 800 soldiers separated from this group, led by Major Grant. This group, led by Major Grant, attacked Fort Duquesne with 800 soldiers. They were utterly defeated. Grant and the surviving soldiers were taken prisoner, while some did make it to retreat.
The British lost due to underestimating the size of the French and Indian forces. Their strategy was to have a company act as a decoy. and on the sides they'd have 400 men waiting to ambush on either side, and there's several more concealed in the baggage train area, which is where you keep all the supplies for your army. Due to the poor job of the recon group, the French and Indian forces were much larger than anticipated, thus causing them to overwhelm the decoys in the ambush.
The British retreated to those left behind at the baggage train. Meanwhile, the Indians, using larger forces and smarter tactics, used the forest and their knowledge of the land to their advantage, known as guerrilla warfare. They ended up setting fire to this area. This is pretty sad. I guess you could say they were straight up savages.
It's time for the mystery document. Private Robert Kirkwood of the 77th Highland Regiment was pursued by 4 Indians and wounded. He later wrote that, "I was immediately taken, but the Indian who laid hold of me would not allow the rest to stop me, though they proposed to do so. In short, he befriended me greatly."
Aftermath time. Many other troops were not as fortunate as our friend, Private Kirkwood. The English suffered 342 casualties, many of which were from the 77th Regiment. A total of 19 were taken prisoner, including Major Grant and Private Kirkwood. The remaining troops rejoined the main army at Fort Ligonier. On the other side, the French and Indians only suffered 8 casualties and 8 wounded. This was a very decisive victory for the French. Although they had won, Ligonier still had a force of 600, but he knew he could not withstand the very strong British force that was over 10 times that number.
The French and Indians continued to occupy the fort until late in the month. Then they fell back and the garrison set fire to the fort late at night to cover their retreat.
Whew. It was hot. I had to take off my headband. Okay, so following what Patrick said, the British arrived at the fort and they were appalled by the sights of the heads of the Highlanders, known as the Scottish people. And later on, they decided to rebuild the Fort Duquesne after the French and Indian burned it down. So later on, they renamed the fort to Fort Pitt after the British Prime Minister William Pitt, who ordered the capture of the strategic location.
Oh, okay. Well, you see, I am the Avatar. Can you stop filming me now? Thank you.
I'm an Indian. Oh. Okay, we're gay. Later on, they renamed it to Fort Pittsburgh. Damn it. Okay. As you may know, there's a city called Pittsburgh in Philadelphia, and this is one of the characteristics of since the British burned it down and all left this. Damn it. What?